A mystery disease known as the gay plague has become an epidemic.
Third highest ranking for HIV diagnosis in the country.
2,000 patients in the Portland area to HIV.
HIV transmission.
Our government and leaders made us believe that an infectious disease known as HIV/AIDS originated from monkeys. But beneath the official narrative lies a web of unsettling rumors. Whispers of human experiments, cover-up conspiracies, and secret government projects. Could these speculations point to the true origins of what was once an incurable disease that threatened and claimed millions of lives? Join us as we unravel each layer of the mystery behind the history, conspiracy, and inception of HIV/AIDS, revealing the buried truth that will ignite new questions, challenge everything we thought we knew, and force us to reconsider the real story behind this infamous disease. According to scientists, HIV traces back to chimpanzees carrying the simian immunodeficiency virus, SIV, a disease that weakens the immune systems of primates. Some believe that humans acquired it possibly when hunters in Africa consumed those chimpanzees, or their cuts and wounds were exposed to the apes' contaminated blood. Matters then took a darker turn when these infected hunters, clueless that they possessed a silent killer, passed it through intimate encounters. From those first fateful moments, a chain reaction may have triggered, spreading across the country, slipping into the United States, and unleashing a global epidemic. Despite this origin being well accepted by many, a shadow of doubt still lingers. One might question that this is merely a fragment of a much darker and complicated narrative. As we dig deeper, controversial events from our history and baffling conspiracies begin to surface, hinting toward a more complex and unsettling backstory. According to Russian professor Yakub Segal's research, the US military was allegedly responsible for the creation of HIV as early as 1977. He suggested that they engineered the virus by combining two pathogens, the Visna sheep virus and HTLV1. Moreover, his theory suggested this lab experiment was unethically tested on homosexual prison inmates who were promised an early release if they volunteered to become test subjects. The infected prisoners' freedom was speculated to have led to the unrestrainable spread of the virus. However, at the end of the Cold War, two former Russian state security agents revealed that Segal's theory was nothing more than a propaganda operation. But despite his colleagues discrediting his claims, Segal stood his ground, denied the accusations, and continued to support his hypothesis. Intriguingly, Segal's theory might be onto something, as dermatologist Alan Cantwell published two compelling books in 1988 and 1993. Backing up the claims that US government scientists developed HIV. According to his theory, researchers engineered a bioweapon disguised as a genetically modified organism, which was introduced through hepatitis B vaccines. Allegedly, the experiments were performed on gay and bisexual men between 1978 and 1981 in major cities across the US. When pressed on his controversial claims, Cantwell declared that the government orchestrated a massive cover-up to conceal the truth. However, the sinister allegations about the origin of HIV/AIDS don't end with these two theories, as other researchers revealed an even more heinous agenda toward a certain population. According to Dr. MacArthur, director of the US Army Advanced Research Project Agency, RPA, within 5 to 10 years from 1969, it would be possible to create a synthetic biological agent with no natural immunity, hinting at what would become HIV/AIDS. Disturbingly, in 1970, Robert McNamara mentioned the dire consequences of population growth and suggested that either birth rates must decrease or death rates must increase to prevent a world of 10 billion people. This timing raises concerns about a potential link between McNamara's population control ideas and the development of AIDS, suggesting more than mere coincidence. In 1991, a radio broadcaster by the name of Milton Cooper published a book called Behold, a Pale Horse. According to his writings, HIV/AIDS was developed to target and diminish the population of people of color and homosexuals. He might or might not have been inspired by American writer Anthony C. Sutton, author of the book Trilaterals Over America, as their ideas are quite similar. Based on Sutton's work, AIDS is a man-made disease developed by the US Army as part of a biological warfare program, funded by Congress and released by elitists to eliminate specific segments of the world's population. Some might wonder why anyone would believe in a conspiracy that so brutally targets minorities. The answer, however, lies in the unsettling way the majority and the government responded to the epidemic. Even as the death toll climbed to thousands each year, a disturbing indifference lingered. Despite knowing the devastation, the disease seemed to elicit only muted concern, as if its victims were expendable. For instance, during a press conference in December 1984, the Reagan administration downplayed the severity of what they referred to as the gay plague, even as it claimed the lives of 4,251 victims in the US. Their dismissal of the growing concern felt like a chilling message about who mattered and who didn't. Some may think these allegations are absurd, but even a few of the most brilliant researchers and scientists believe the universally accepted origin of HIV/AIDS is far more ludicrous and irrelevant. Seeing a pattern among the most affected communities, these scholars suspect the victims of the virus were meticulously targeted.
The only thing I can liken it to is a war zone, but most of us have never lived in a war zone, but it's you never knew where the bomb was going to drop.
According to the evidence researchers collected, Fort Detrick in Maryland served as the US biological warfare hub, and it collaborated with the CIA under a formal agreement in 1952. While both agencies have taken steps to cover their tracks, some original documents remain, revealing a disturbing history. Personnel from the Army's Special Operations Division used specifically designed suitcases that released Bacillus subtilis on unsuspecting civilians at Greyhound bus terminals in Washington, Chicago, and San Francisco, and also airports in New York, Boston, and Los Angeles. Alarmingly, this operation was done during the early 60s, when pressures on civil rights and racial equality were reaching a boiling point, amplifying the suspicion that these experiments targeted marginalized communities already fighting for their basic human rights. Disturbingly, once an individual gets exposed to the bacteria, they're prone to respiratory infections, blood poisoning, and food poisoning. But the government didn't stop there. According to the classified documents, the tests were repeated with smallpox agents, grown in large quantities, and converted to a lethal powder for spraying. Based on a US Army report, smallpox was the perfect agent to spread an unsuspecting virus. It is highly infectious through close contact and spreads rapidly. It also has a long incubation of fairly consistent duration, making it difficult for doctors to diagnose the illness immediately. More so, a patient's recovery tends to last for an extended period. With the rapid growth of smallpox, an even more formidable narrative arises. Just as hope was kindled by the promise of a cure, certain research suggests that this was merely the prologue to the true HIV/AIDS epidemic. According to an article in the Times magazine, an unnamed WHO advisor hinted that the mass smallpox vaccination campaign was the reason for the explosion of the virus. Based on his findings, the smallpox vaccine caused serious complications in people who already have weak immune systems and progressed the spread of the infection. Speculations became more suspicious when a military recruit who was thought to have dormant HIV passed away months after receiving the medication. Meanwhile, some skeptics believe the smallpox vaccine itself was contaminated with the virus. However, subsequent studies in South Africa revealed that the methods used during the smallpox vaccination process were unsafe, particularly due to unsterilized syringes and other contaminated medical tools. This may have contributed to the spread and mutation of the immunodeficiency virus, raising new questions about the true origins of the epidemic. As technology advances, many believe cures for various medical issues will inevitably be discovered. Yet, just before the dawn of the 21st century, another author, Edward Hooper, introduced a controversial narrative about the conception of the virus. According to his book, The River, A Journey to the Source of HIV and AIDS, HIV/AIDS originated from oral polio vaccines. For 7 years, Hooper meticulously researched the origins of AIDS, poring over thousands of pages of medical records, scientific papers, and government documents. He even conducted more than 600 interviews across Africa, Europe, and the United States, painting a detailed and unsettling picture of the virus's beginnings. And based on his research, he proposed that early batches of this medication contain grown-in cultures of chimpanzee kidney cells infected with the primate virus. During his research, Hooper discovered that in the 1950s, approximately 400 captured chimpanzees were used in polio research at Wistar's Camp Lindi. However, the Institute's director, Hilary Koprowski, strongly denied the allegations and insisted that only Asian macaque monkeys' kidney tissues were used. Still, Hooper remained unconvinced and investigated further. He traced the Wistar vaccine's administration to rural villages in the former Belgian colonies, now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi, between 1957 and 1960. By examining HIV-positive blood samples collected in Africa before 1981, Hooper found a striking correlation. 47 out of 52 HIV-positive samples were from villages where the Wistar vaccine had been distributed. Intriguingly, all these samples were taken within 100 miles of the vaccination sites, where, a decade earlier, locals had first reported a mysterious disease they called SLIM. Despite the potential validity of Hooper's research, many scientists considered it merely circumstantial evidence. However, skepticism persists, fueled by allegations of a cover-up and denying the publication of his works. Amidst the obstacles preventing him from sharing his findings, Hooper sought the support of distinguished Oxford professor William Hamilton to write a foreword for his book. While Hamilton did not fully endorse Hooper's conclusions, he urged the scientific community to give the work serious consideration and engage in open, meaningful discussions. Unfortunately, further research suggests that HIV and SIV were not found in the stored oral polio vaccines. In response to Hooper's claims, computational biologist Bet Korber deployed Nirvana, the world's most powerful supercomputer, to indirectly challenge his findings. According to Korber and her colleagues, the most lethal strain of the virus, known as Group M, had evolved into 11 distinct subtypes. By unraveling the genetic history and tracing these branches back to the HIV-1 trunk, Korber's team estimated the existence of a last common ancestor they termed the Eve virus. Korber claimed this ancestral virus crossed from a chimpanzee to a founder human prior to 1930 and began mutating into various forms as it spread among humans, decades before the Wistar vaccine trials. Supporting this evidence, other research has shown that the different strains of HIV-1 and HIV-2 indicate that simian viruses cross the species barrier multiple times. This undermines the notion that the AIDS epidemic originated from a single virus, suggesting a more complex and varied viral conception. However, despite all the evidence pointing to different sets of origin, a haunting idea persists: the existence of a single person responsible for spreading the virus that started a global epidemic, Patient Zero. For years, a French-Canadian flight attendant known as Gaëtan Dugas was presumed to be the first person contaminated with HIV. According to speculation, he was believed to have contracted HIV in Africa or Haiti, bringing it back to the US and infecting dozens of men before his death. This idea gained widespread attention through Randy Shilt's writings, which subjected Dugas to years of scrutiny and discrimination. Based on Shilt's book, The Band Played On, Dugas has sociopathic tendencies, allegedly infecting others with the virus intentionally, or, at the very least, recklessly endangering them. Described as a charming, handsome, insatiable athlete, Dugas claimed to have had over 2,500 sexual partners across North America since becoming sexually active in 1972, averaging hundreds of encounters per year. His life and actions, painted in such a controversial light, became the focal point of the Patient Zero myth, further complicating his legacy. Years later, Dugas's name has been cleared, along with his infamous title, Patient Zero.
The myth of Patient Zero has been shattered. The Quebec man thought to be at the epicenter of the rise of the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s has had his name cleared.
According to sources, he was actually designated as Patient O, where the O stood for out of California, referring to his location in relation to a study he participated in. However, this was tragically misinterpreted as Zero, leading to the mistaken belief that he was the first person infected with HIV. Despite years of vilification, some viewed Dugas as a hero. His participation in a crucial cluster study allowed him to identify 72 men with whom he had intimate contact. From that group, scientists were able to test and observe 40 individuals, including Dugas, which provided invaluable insights into the spread and nature of HIV/AIDS. Moreover, a 2016 genetic analysis revealed that the viral strain Dugas carried was already circulating among men in New York before he began frequenting the city's gay bars. This finding indicates that Dugas was not the first person with HIV, but rather an early case of the virus. To this day, the identity of the first patient or group responsible for the initial spread of the virus remains unknown. Despite all the circumstantial pieces of evidence, accepted narrative, and possible theories about HIV/AIDS, some questions remain unanswered, pulling everyone into an abyss of curiosity. According to Dr. Korba's research, 11 cross-species transmissions to humans have been documented, but only one strain caused the HIV epidemic. Was there an acting agent inside our bodies during the 20th century that triggered only one virus when the consumption of ape meat had long been part of the African culture? More concerns arose when considering that person-to-person transmission could have occurred long before the initial HIV/AIDS outbreak. Given the 300 years of the slave trade, during which people from regions with SIV-infected sooty mangabes and chimpanzees were transported to the Americas, one might expect that SIV would have also spread to Europe. Curiously, this does not appear to have happened. These points hint at a questionable gap in our understanding of the virus's origins. Some research suggests HIV groups are only mildly pathogenic and not highly infectious to humans. Despite countless opportunities over 50,000 years of human exposure to SIV, it has only once evolved into a highly infectious and virulent form of HIV. Could it be possible that there may be an important missing link in unraveling the true roots of the epidemic that we have yet to discover? Click on the next video to know more secrets as we unravel the powers and dark agendas behind John F. Kennedy's assassination.